cross-border cooperation between EU and Russia. It's my research focus, but because you know that we all live because of grants, and now it's a period, then I focus to another project, but I really fall in love with cross-border cooperation between EU and Russia. I work in Institute of Geography, Russian Academy of Science, in laboratory for geopolitical studies. And my colleagues and me, we take part in a number of European projects like Euroborderscapes, and collect information for SPON project and so on. And my presentation will be about cross-border cooperation and neighborhood in the EU-Russian borderland. I focus on period since 2000s and 2013 period. I mean TASIS Interact projects and ENPI projects. But maybe I mentioned a little bit about last period, 2014-2020. If we start to talk about European neighborhood policy, we all know contradiction between problem with Russia vision of this project. I mean that Russia don't want to be a part of European neighborhood, and at the same time Russia decided to be a part of cross-border cooperation program. And when to understand how change cooperation between Russia and the EU, we need to turn to first period. I mean TASIS Interact CBC program 2000-2006. My colleague and I, we analyzed a lot of materials. We collected interview in the Russian Northwest region, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also we collected information about all cross-border cooperation programs since 2000s to 2013. And we tried to analyze territorial structure of cooperation, which territory cooperate with other territory and so on. And when we analyzed the structure and interviews we collected, we found the problems which raised our interviewers. First of all, it's asymmetry of cooperation. It was asymmetry of ideas because we know that in the first period, if we talk about TASIS Interact programs, it was period when European side, European part played the key role in initiating of cooperation. And Russian partners has no idea how to cooperate, what the cross-border cooperation is. And it was period of asymmetry of financial possibilities because Russian partners has no money for cooperation because you know maybe that in Russian realities the most a lot of money we have on federal level, not in regional level, and especially no in local level. And as a result, we have asymmetry of results because in that period, for example, if we take Kaliningrad region and neighbor region of Poland. We had a lot of projects where the main results was on Poland side. And for example, I remember a project about stadium building. It's typical project of stadium, and the Russian side had only project documentation, and Poland side had stadium, real stadium, and it was a reason for irritation in regional level of authorities, and especially in central authorities also. Another problems, it was predominance of soft projects. It was a period when Russia needed investments, and especially when we interviewed guys in Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they said that Russia imagined that cross-border cooperation give us factories, new highways, and so on. But there were a lot of soft projects, people-to-people communications, and so on. And it was also perceived like a problem in that period. And another problem which raised in our interviews, it's problem with visibility of programs and their weak impact on local development. A lot of people has no imagination what is cross-border cooperation, how it influences on regional and local development even. And another problem was poor coordination of project activities, including financing cooperation. You all know that in 2004, programs presented like joint programs, and partners tried to create common joint projects, but Russian partners applied these projects in TASIS, and TASIS office, and foreign European partners applied their projects in Interreg office, and that was the reason for a lot of problems with financial procedure and so on. And another problem which raised in our interview, it's distance of project from state boundaries. There were a lot of projects which had a big distance from boundaries, and the question was, is it a cross-border cooperation? And concentration projects in big city. Especially, it was true especially for Russian side, because we all know that in Russia, one of the big problems is centralization of everything. And as a result, if we look at spatial structure, territorial structure of cooperation, we will see a lot of huge city which is involved in cross-border cooperation. I tried to analyze what was real priority, because you know that especially for TASIS program, there were a lot of small priorities, but I decided to do mine priorities. It's environment protection, it's infrastructure, it's economic development, civil society, and local and regional governance. And you can compare here two periods of cross-border cooperation, and you you can see here that maybe some Russians questions was implemented in decision. For example, you can see not very huge infrastructure money for infrastructure in period 2000-2006, and much more expenditure for this sector in next period of cross-border cooperation. If we look in ENPI CBC programs 2007-2030, it's improving visibility of results. It's reducing asymmetries, in particular the appearance of Russian financial contribution. You know that that was period when Russia tried to establish equal partnership in not only in cross-border cooperation but in relations with EU and all. Russia contribute money for these programs also, and also in some Russian regions was established some grants from regional authorities and even from central authorities too. Another reason for reducing asymmetries was that Russian partners gained experience of cooperation. If you look at me, I know English not very good, especially for such presentation when it was a surprise for me. But a lot of people even learn English. It's obviously that it's important for cooperation, and a lot of colleagues graduated in European universities, and as a result, Russian partners was ready for new for cooperation in this period. And I think if we in our seminar raised question why cooperation between cross-border cooperation between EU and Russia is success, and at the same time has success, but at the same time relation between EU and Russia it's epic fail. I think the reason why it's common governance, because if we look in the program, you know that if we discuss theory of cross-border cooperation, we know that mainly a lot of authors supposed that cross-border cooperation, it's cooperation through the border between local authorities, because local actors, between maybe regional actors, but not central actors. But I think if we look at cooperation between EU and Russia, central, federal, and supranational authorities involved in this cooperation on the stage when cooperation is establishing, when signed intergovernmental documents, and on the stage of generating general program rules and priorities. And it's very important, I think, not only for European borderland of Russia, because when we had a program, we had a project which called Russian Borderland Challenges of Neighborhood. And we try to compare European border of Russia and cooperation on this border, and post-Soviet borders and cooperation there. even in Kazakhstan and even in on border with Belarus, we have a lack of intergovernmental cooperation on the field of cross-border cooperation. I mean, we have a lack of documents which could regulate of this cooperation. But if we look at European borderland, we have very convenient framework for cooperation. Each actor understands the priorities of cooperation, the formats of cooperation, and it creates safety and understandable rules, very convenient for each actors. Next thing I want to say, it's shifting of projects closer to the border. Because we in this period we have infrastructure projects which is related with constructing cross-border point or reconstruction on this point, and for example projects for road building and so on. And but we still have very important role of large cities in cross-border cooperation projects, especially if we speak about Russian part. On this map, I tried to show you special structure of cross-border cooperation. Each line on this map, this map, is a connection between actors in one or two or three projects. For example, if we have a lot of projects between Białystok of Poland and Mariampole of Lithuania, we have a lot of lines. And we can see here that a lot of cities, especially big cities, which is involved in cooperation. And we can see here very big concentration of cross-border cooperation projects in large European cities, not only Russian cities, but mainly, especially in the Russian part. This is program Karelia, ENPI, and ENPI and Dasis Interreg. It's this map give opportunity you to compare this two program period, and we can see that a lot of program on Russian part concentrated, a lot of projects concentrated in Petrozavodsk and St. Petersburg. So it's also show you the concentration. And at the same time, if we look in neighbor Finland territory, we can see how many centers involved in cooperation. And another interesting thing, you can see here center initiating CBC projects and center involved in CBC projects. And on this map, you can see that a lot of initiators in Russian part was from Petrozavodsk and not so many from local cities, villages, and so on. And it's absolutely another thing we can see on Finland part. This is program Estonia, Latvia, and Russia. And the same, we can see the same, but two main regional center, it's Pskov and St. Petersburg, gained a lot of projects, the most part of projects, and absolutely another picture on European in Latvia and Estonia. And maybe the most interesting, it's Southeast Finland, Russia program. You can see that the most part of projects was concentrated in St. Petersburg. And it's very important to understand that even in other programs, look here, even in Karelia program, a lot of projects concentrated in St. Petersburg. But you can see here that in this program, St. Petersburg, it's not a core territory of this program. The same in Estonia, Latvia, Russia, and especially, of course, because in this program, St. Petersburg is a core territory of the program. The most part of beneficiaries is in St. Petersburg. I don't know if it's possible to change something here. I think it's possible, maybe, but you know that St. Petersburg, it's a huge city. It's the second capital of Russia, and a lot of people here, a lot of institutions here, and we can take an account, of course, Russian centralized political system, and it's also reason why a lot of projects concentrated here. But for example, if we take program Southeast Finland, Russia, we can see that in Finland also very big concentration, but much more cities not only involved in cooperation, but even initiating cooperation. Well, and especially interesting for me was case of Colarctic program. By the way, it's only the program which was not divided because you know, in the period 2014-2020, it was period when European Union made a decision to divide big program like Poland, Russia, Lithuania. Now we have two separate programs, Poland, Russia, Lithuania, Russia. But Colarctic was only the program which was saved in initial form. And you can see here that if we look on this structure, we can see that it's program not cross-border cooperation. I think it's like trans-border cooperation programs, because we can see, for example, Arkhangelsk, and maybe you understand, I hope you understand the distance from Arkhangelsk to Russian Finland border. It's very big, and especially if we look in Naryan Mar, Nenets Autonomous Okrug of Russia, it's too far. I think a year by foot to the Russian borders, but it's not. I think it's not a problem. I think CBC Colarctic, it's an example. It's a model example of synergy of cross-border and trans-border cooperation, because if we look at Barents Regional Council program documents, we will see that they look at Colarctic like an financial support of their activity. And Barents Regional Councils more and more remind the Euro region, like Euro region, and at the same time, Colarctic reminds much more and more trans-border cooperation programs. So it's like example of synergy between two different formats of cooperation. And we see the same picture, I think, because you can see how many beneficiaries in Arkhangelsk, in Kandalaksh, Naryan Mar even. It's the main city of this region, main administrative center of this region, but not so many beneficiaries from local places, from local cities. and especially if we look not only involving all actors, but if we look at main initiators of cross-border cooperation. It's just to look at better. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't speak more about the 2040-2020 period because I need more time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes to deeply research it. But thing I want to say that program, cross-border cooperation program, really was reason for reason for reformatting of cross-border cooperation institution on Russian European borderland. First of all, I want to say that I have a bad news. The most part of Euro regions is dead now. Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4, no more. Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs tried to understand which Euro regions is working, which is not working. And they decided for themselves only, not for any recommendation, but to understand. They decided that now work only Euro region Karelia, of course, and I several times attended meeting of this Euro region, and I really understand that this Euro region not only alive, thanks God, but this Euro region actively involved in cross-border cooperation program. I think it's on the model example of Euro region, which has proactive position in cross-border cooperation programming. And another region is Baltic, but 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Russia was not actively involved in this Euro region. So if we really look at this Euro region, we understand that alive only Karelia and Baltic, but without Russia. But other Euro region is dead, and I think cross-border cooperation, it was like I don't know, like a judge for this Euro region, but alive only those Euro region who could use this program for their goals, if they had goals, and for their priorities, if they had priorities. But I'm not sure a lot of them had priorities. Thank you very much for your hospitality.
No, well, I think we have to thank you, Alexander. I mean, we are so grateful that you could step in, and especially, well, on such, well, very last minute, you know, and also having really this amazing PowerPoint presentation ready with all these super relevant and interesting details in view of our webinar today. So I think we unfortunately started on a very bad note, considering that our keynote speaker wasn't there, but then fortunately you stepped in and you did an amazing job. Okay, so I think, of course, because we lost some time at the beginning, I think we can continue a little bit longer than was foreseen in the program. Luckily, we did have this 15-minute buffer, so of course we don't need to end now sharply at 11. So I don't know if the participants have already raised any questions, but maybe I can start with a question. In any case, I think this was really super interesting because you really managed to give us an overview of the main features of the cross-border cooperation between the EU and Russia since it was launched. So since the early 2000s, and then per multi-annual budget cycle, you have also highlighted, okay, what were the main strengths, what were the weaknesses, also in terms of the main features, what could be better, what was already working well. And so clearly we saw that already in the second multi-annual budget cycle from 2007 to 2013, some improvements were made. Then we will come back, of course, later today throughout the different panels to the current budget cycle, so the 2014 to 2020, and also we will already have a sneak preview of what we can expect from the next one, because we will have among the speakers someone from the European Commission, so she will also be able to share us some insights on what we can expect from the next one. But I think one interesting point to pick out is the idea of this common governance. So this was perhaps lacking in the first multi-annual programming, so from 2000 to 2006, but then you mentioned that from 2007 till 2013, this was present. So there was this idea of the common governance. And if we now try to understand, so what are the factors of well, driving the success of cross-border cooperation between the EU and Russia, this is something to look into. So I was wondering whether you could perhaps elaborate a little bit on this notion of the common governance. So what should we understand concretely under this common governance, and also in terms of the current cooperation that is still going? I assume that this element is still very much present. But this is something I think, in light of the questions that we're interested in today, would be interesting to know. So if you could perhaps elaborate a little bit on this particular aspect. You're still muted.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's hard to me. Could you repeat your question about common governance?
Sure. So what I meant is that, so you were saying in your presentation, so because one of the questions that we're interested in the webinar is to understand what factors are driving the success of cross-border cooperation, and then particularly relating to features of so the second programming cycle, so from 2007 to 2013, you highlighted this notion of the common governance as a fact contributing to the success of the cross-border cooperation.
I think it's a very important thing, because when we compare, for example, cross-border cooperation program with Kazakhstan, you know, we have no contradiction with Kazakhstan. We love each other, and Eurasian integration and so on. But the program with Kazakhstan has no common governance. And how they build cooperation, how we build with Kazakhstan colleagues cooperation, we have in this program priorities, like in European program also, but these priorities has no special financing and has no governance. For example, one of priority is supporting of small business on this border, but they have no common budget for this priority. They have special indicators which they need to achieve, and they have no plans how to do it. And but at the same time, each region should say central government that we work on cooperation with Kazakhstan colleague, and Kazakhstan colleague the same need to report to Astana, or now Nur-Sultan, about success in cross-border cooperation with Russia. And each region has a plan for cooperation. But this plan not agreed between these regions, and maybe one Akim, it's the main guy in Kazakhstan region. It's okay, well, you know, and gubernator in Russian region could call each other. Okay, I have an idea to organize seminar. You need to create report to Nur-Sultan. I need to report in Moscow. Let's organize something. Okay, and they organize, but different budget, different management, different reporting, one report in Astana, Nur-Sultan, one in Moscow, and so on. And as a result, no results. And they try to report a lot of culture, a lot of soft projects, which was initially not a part of cross-border cooperation. But for example, theater from Orenburg decided to go to Uralsk in Kazakhstan and organize concert there. And after this, Kazakhstan authorities and Russian authorities reported to Moscow and Nur-Sultan that was a project of cross-border cooperation. We work hardly. And I think that common budget and common governance, it's very, very important. And that's the reason why in Russian borderland, we have on the one hand the problem on level country level, and at the same time we have no problem on the level of cross-border cooperation. And you know, when we discussed some when we did interview in the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they said us the very important thing, that Euro-region meeting when Russian part and European part work under the program, meeting in Barents Regional Council and other transborder institutions, that's field for para-diplomatic connection. And maybe you know, maybe not, in Russian scientific literature, a lot of authors said that a lot of institutions on the Russian border, on Russian-European border, they intersect each other. Barents Euro-region, Barents Council, Council of States, Baltic States, Northern Dimension, cross-border cooperation programs, Euro-regions, and a lot of small projects and so on. And for what? A lot of institutions on this border. But when we discussed this point in Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they said us that it's like network which doesn't allow European-Russian relations fall lower than this network. And this network support not only cooperation between border region and interregional cooperation. It's more than just cross-border and interregional cooperation. It's also para-diplomatic cooperation between EU and Russia. Because, for example, if we have a problem, for example, with Lithuania, we can avoid meeting one guy from Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so we can use another institution, for example, Barents Regional Council, and Mr. Lavrov and Mr. somebody from other country can discuss not only Barents regional cooperation. That's not my just my imagination. That's that's the result of my interview on the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, again, this is of course very relevant also in order to understand what really drives the success of cross-border cooperation, but also how come that this cross-border cooperation is still relatively thriving despite the high political tensions that we still notice between the EU and Russia. And I think you're already providing us with part of the answer to that question, namely that it's really considered to be at the para-diplomatic level, namely at the subnational level, and this should be seen separately, let's say, from the national level. So this is definitely something that we can take with us in the following discussions. So I believe that we should probably conclude the session here. I don't see any questions at this stage, so therefore I think we should now again really thank Alexander for stepping in, for being our savior. I think you really did a wonderful job providing us with such an insightful presentation, which is so much on topic of the webinar's topic. So thank you so much for this. I hope you can also join us for the next discussion. So we will reconvene in about 5 minutes. So we will start 11:15 with panel 1, in which we will then zoom in very concretely with practitioners on some best practices. Again, trying to understand, okay, so what are these programs, projects about, but then really zooming in into some concrete examples. And then also we will look into what we can expect from the next programming cycle, so from the 2021-2027 programming cycle. So we can have a short break. I think it's probably best if you stay logged in to avoid any technical issues, but we will then reconvene for panel 1 in about 5 minutes. Bye-bye everyone, and see you again soon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Domenico Valenza, and I am a PhD fellow at UNU Greece and Ghent University. It is my pleasure to be the moderator of the first panel on this event, EU-Russia cross-border cooperation as a rare example case of constructive EU-Russia engagement. As the moderator, I would like to remind you that the panel will be recorded. This will allow participants to listen to or see part of the meeting afterwards. As we are in a Zoom environment, this is also the opportunity to share some basic Zoom functions. Zoom offers a mute microphone option that cuts down on ambient feedback for the audience. Please make sure that your microphone is muted throughout the session. I would like to encourage you to use the live chat feature, the chat box on Zoom. You can find this at the bottom of your Zoom window. And feel free to use the chat box to ask questions, share comments on the participants' presentation, and answer. The title of this session is Best Practices and Concrete Examples of EU-Russia Cross-Border Cooperation. After the general overview we have had on the historical overview we have had on cross-border cooperation, it's time now to look in detail of what makes interesting, relevant, successful this collection of programs, together with experiences from the local level, we also have the opportunity to get insights on the future of cross-border cooperation, as current programs of the former multi-annual financial framework will soon be replaced by a new generation of program. I'm going to briefly introduce the program of this first panel. We have three speakers. We will move from local to the higher level. We will start with Elizaveta Druzhinina, project manager of Culture Open, Creating Culture Together, founded in Karelia CBC, cross-border cooperation. Then we will move to the program with our second speaker, Jukka-Pekka Berman, program manager for the Southeast Finland-Russia cross-border cooperation program. And finally, our third speaker will be Simona Polova, cross-border cooperation team leader at the European Commission, Directorate General, Regional and Urban Policy. This is how it works. We invited speakers to provide first a brief presentation of maximum 8 minutes on their experience in cross-border cooperation from their different perspectives. Presentation will be followed by a discussion on two key points: what drives the success of EU-Russia cross-border cooperation in the view of our speakers, and what recommendations they would give in other fields of EU-Russia cooperation. Finally, the remaining 30 minutes will serve for Q&A with the audience. With this agenda in mind, I am glad to move to our first speaker, Elizaveta Druzhinina, project manager for Culture Open, Creating Culture Together. Elizaveta lives and works in Petrozavodsk, Republic of Karelia. Since 2008, she has been working for the development department of the Karelian Regional Institute of Continuing Professional Education at Petrozavodsk State University. She will give us insights on the project level. Elizaveta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see only the big slide or the whole line of my presentation?
We see the wall. You may try to zoom in.
So I'm trying to make it on full screen. Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, we are very proud and happy to participate in this seminar, and we would be glad if our experience of our project would be interesting and useful for the other participants. So the project was Culture Open, and its full name is Culture Open, Creating Culture Together, and it was funded by the Karelia CBC program. So the Culture Open team, it combined the partners from Petrozavodsk, Russia, Karelia, with the Petrozavodsk State University, Karelian Regional Institute of Continuing Professional Education being the lead partner, and I'm representing the lead partner. And also the consortium also joined the city cultural institutions such as libraries and also music and choral school, children music and choral school, and also the city cultural house performing most of the cultural events in Petrozavodsk. And there was also the Museum of Fine Arts of the Republic of Karelia on the Russian side. On the Finnish side, there was one partner, the UNSU City Cultural Services, and they were we ended up the project with only one partner, although in the beginning there was two partners from the Finnish side. The project period was starting October 2018 through February 21, so we are already over. We completed the project, and the budget was a little bit over 400 euros. So we started about 2016, when the two cities of Yoinsu and Petrozavodsk, being the cultural and population centers of the territory, agreed, noticed and put it on the surface that most of the cultural services offered at the territories were mainly designed for native speaking people and also those able-bodied people, and we were absolutely not prepared for the needs of differing people with disabilities and those who are not speaking the language, without language skills. So we came up with this project to create accessible and inclusive cultural services for immigrants. That was target group number one, and also for the disabled people in Yoinsu and Petrozavodsk. And we decided to go through to achieve it by two different ways. Firstly, by making the services more accessible, and secondly, to increase the involvement, engagement of the target groups in the cultural services. We are very proud and honored that we received the certificate of outstanding project communication, and this is mostly due to the efforts of our partners and also of the Finnish partners, because we really were very active in making our projects and our activities visible. Firstly, we increased the accessibility by making some mapping in the beginning of the project and some survey to reveal the problems of cultural services being not visible enough. And we improved information accessibility. Also, we responded, I would say, pretty much efficient to the pandemic, to the COVID-19 situation, and we managed to switch over to other technologies and other methods of delivering cultural services. Also, as an educational center, the university shared a lot of experience, learned and shared a lot of experience to other projects on the efficient ways of being visible in the mass media, of being visible among the target groups and the common public in the society with what we are doing. We also made a big step with the physical accessibility of cultural services and products. You can see here some improvements done. For example, some ramps were installed, co-working place was installed, and many other things, most of them on the Russian side, and that really helped to improve the percentage of our visitors at the premises of the cultural actors. Also, the project piloted and introduced, so to say, co-creative inclusive model, what we called, for better inclusivity of the target groups in the activities. We had some artist exchanges and inclusive performances groups. So you can see here the two, for example, the photos of the two inclusive groups with disabled artists organized within the project territory. They were also provided by some instructions, some marketing, and also by the performance venues during the project. And we expect that they will be stable and stay after the project as well. These are the photos of the artist exchanges. They happened, two of them, both online and offline because of the COVID. That was a great success, and we felt really big satisfaction with the disabled artists sharing their talents, and that was very touching to see how they reveal their talents and start believing in themselves. So that is a separate topic of the project we are very proud of. Also, another group was the immigrants, and we carried out a lot of activities trying to involve immigrants in the social and cultural life of the territories. Like there were some multicultural story hour workshops by immigrants. Also, there was training course for immigrants who would like to be cultural professionals in Finland after the projects. We were very proud of the new museum-based inclusive program based on the Museum of Fine Arts of the Karelia. That was an innovative and very needed thing for Karelia. The program was targeted for the children with autism spectrum disorders and those cultural professionals working with this group based on the museums. We shared also it and received also a diploma for that, a national Russian diploma. So that was also great. We also used hand-on and interactive approach when training and sharing what we learned. Here we can see that we have cooperated with other ENI projects. For example, the Loki project, they were focusing on the cinematography development. We had after the COVID started, we have made some changes in the budget. Some equipment was used, and to make it most efficient, we asked for additional practical training, hand-on training, how to use that equipment that could be used for delivering cultural services offline, of marketing, of promoting the cultural services, of communicating better with each other. So there were several courses, several trainings delivered to the target groups for the cultural professionals as well as just interested parties, to the beneficiaries, and that was very much useful. Actually, we already implemented the results of those trainings. For example, some of the big cultural festivals were run with the usage of these new technologies, equipment, and etc. This is that museum practice for the children with autism. So we also organized and make up some kind of sensoring room. It is on the right left hand, when people or kids with the autism can relax from observing art in the museum and just touch different things, experience different sensoring feelings inside that room. So that is very much popular. And
sorry, you have 1 more minute.
Okay, I'm actually finishing, and there were also a lot of activities that were not originally in the project plan, and that inclusive camp for the disabled kids, teenagers, young people, and their parents was one of those. It was organized based on the co-working place of the project. That was where also the parents received some psychological assistance while the disabled kids practiced some artistic things, gestures, and performances, etc. Very briefly, that is what we were doing and what we have achieved. I would be glad to answer the questions, if any.
Thank you very much, Elizaveta. That's a very interesting and insightful presentation. I look forward to the discussion on particularly how this inclusivity and co-creation hold together. I want to move forward to our second speaker today, Jukka Berman. Jukka Berman is a program director at the Regional Council of South Karelia. Before this present position, he worked as a professor director of the Northern Dimension Research Center and a researcher at the Business School of Lappeenranta University Technology. Jukka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I must say that I knew quite a lot already the project introduced before me, so it is really interesting project. I have been following that quite a lot and intensively because of personal interests. But I'm going to say a few words about our current program, Southeast Finland Russia CBC program, and then less words say about the future programming period. How can I move these here? Now, where we are locating, you probably know St. Petersburg, and of course Lappeenranta, where I am sitting now. It's in South Karelia, but the core region is this dark blue, and then adjoining regions, including Republic of Karelia, light blue area there. And then some about us, the basic things about our program area and people and organizations acting in this program area. We have a strong common trust existing, long history, collaborating with the Russians, with EU partners, even Swedish partners. We have some experience. And then strength is that we really are, as in the beginning of this session, introduced that local level. We are local level actors. We are grassroots level actors. We are doing some concrete actions. And then what is specific here in our region, we have a strong scientific base existing here. In St. Petersburg, in Lappeenranta, we have strong scientific universities, and because of that, strong SME fundament here existing. Of course, traditional bigger industrial companies here. And then what is potential here? It's always potential, but there is always potential, but digitalization, green issues, and still SMEs are underutilized in this program. But some figures, it's about 80 million euros, our program framework, financial framework, and this is through joint program as all CBC programs. Also that it has Finnish national funding and Russian national funding. It's joint program, and we have allocated all resources already for 71 projects, and hopefully they are implemented by the end of 2022, depending on COVID somehow. And about the partners, we have received a lot of applications, including about 1,000 partners, potential partners. And it's quite equally between Finland and Russia. And it also tells for me and hopefully for you that we are doing collaboration, share experiences, establishing new projects, developing our regions together. And then a few words about the future. Now we are programming this new programming period, developing content, and hope that we will start it by the end of 2022. The program area is still the same. It tells also about the continuity, the strong trust between the partners, between the countries, and good results that decision makers and people in this region, in this region and program area are pretty much satisfied what we are doing now. And then these are the focuses in the future: smart, green, better connected, cooperative Europe. That's it. No more, no less. But what is different compared to previous programming work when we were developing this current program? what I have heard that this is one of the first times that all 3 programs are with the national authorities, branch offices and MAs and the EU Commission are getting together, sharing thoughts periodically within once per 3 months without any memos. We are sharing, discussing especially difficult issues. For example, logo, it's one of the most important issue and most talkative issue also. This kind of we are sharing there. And this really helps and support us. It means me and my colleagues to develop the content for the program. And I believe that we are doing really great job here and still have the focus on grassroots level activities at the local level to develop our regions. Thanks a lot, and you can visit in our web pages to follow what we are doing and what we are planning to do in the future. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Jukka, for your presentation, in which you were able to include both elements from the past and what we are going to see in the next years, and we will delve into this topic also when it comes to what we can improve, something that already works. You mentioned the case of coordination, for instance. Let's move to the last but not least speaker, Simona Polova. In her current assignment, Simona Polova is the team leader for European Neighbourhood instrument at the European Commission in the Directorate General, Regional and Urban Policy. In the unit, dealing as well with macro-regional strategies, transnational, interregional, and cooperation and enlargement policy. She's in charge of the team following 15 cross-border cooperation programs in the previous multi-annual financial framework, which were transferred from DG NEAR, DG Neighbourhood Enlargement, in January 2020. We now also have we started from the micro and we are moving from the macro from headquarters. Thank you, Simona, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Domenico, and thank you for this invitation. Good morning to everybody from Brussels as well. Yes, indeed, what we have heard from the previous speakers was about how the grassroots cooperation really works on the ground, and I do share this on one hand this conviction that this is a very unique kind of cooperation within even the EU instruments that we have. And I think that it is also very important to underline that the cross-border cooperation programs with Russia, also with the other neighborhood countries, are indeed on the edge of the two European Union policies. On one hand, they contribute to the cohesion policy, which is the policy which is aimed to reduce the regional disparities. And on the other hand, it is a very important instrument of the EU external policy. So just to remind that there are currently 15 European Neighbourhood Instrument cross-border cooperation programs that exist with the countries of the Eastern Neighbourhood and the Southern Neighbourhood. And with the Russian Federation, those are 7 of them. So nearly half of those 15 are currently with the Russian Federation. I think, and it has been already stressed by the previous speakers, that what is the unique about them is namely the way they are governed, the governance of these programs. And I strongly believe that the fact that these programs are multi-annual and that they are run under what we call in the EU terminology shared management mode, that this makes the success of these programs. Those are very important factors that make the success. Just let me remind you that the shared management means that these programs are not directly managed by the European Union, but the management is shared. The responsibility of the management is shared between the Commission and the member states or the European Union. We are working in very close contact with our counterparts and colleagues from the European External Action Service, of course. And these programs are basically modeled, or the model they take is what is the internal cooperation programs, European territorial cooperation programs, which are very well known in the member states as being called as Interreg. So this Interreg initiative has been there already for 30 years. And the idea to extend this cooperation beyond and to the EU external borders came basically already, as it has been explained, like two programming periods from 2004, and this very successful kind of cooperation has been continued. If you can please put the next slides on. Thank you very much. So if we move into the cooperation with the Russian Federation, we can see the coverage of the 7 programs. I won't get really into details of that, but as I have said, what is unique indeed is that these programs have a very strong regional and local orientation and ownership, because on both program level and the projects level, the governance makes it obligatory for the partners from all participating countries in these programs to develop the program and the project jointly together. They are asked, every project is asked to have a lead partner and a project partner. The lead partner can be as well from the Russian Federation as from the member state, and they are bound to work together to develop the projects together, to implement them together, and either to finance them or to have a common staffing, which is an inherent feature of Interreg, European Union Interreg programs, which is working as well on these external borders. As for the thematic scope of these programs, I believe that it has also been probably explained in the keynote lecture at the beginning, but there is a wide range of themes and beneficiaries, which also helps to create this strong, let's say, regional and local ownership. These programs invest in one hand in the people-to-people projects, a soft kind of cooperation, but at the same time they can as well support infrastructure investment. Typically, it would be support to the green topics, to the culture and natural heritage kind of projects, but also to the entrepreneurship development, for example. Like very recently, there was a project which was awarded the Arctic Prize, which was supported by one of the Finnish Russian programs, the Colarctic program. Let me switch to the next slide. Thank you very much. Here you can see the list of the programs that we have and the websites, and as well the important part, of course, is the funding part. These programs are funded by on one hand the EU funds, and there are 2 funds which are shared within the EU funds. On one hand, as I have said, the cohesion policy funding, so-called European Regional Development Fund, and on the other hand, the external policy funding. So in this case, European Neighbourhood Instrument Fund. And what makes what is a remarkable feature is that the commitment of the Russian Federation to participate in these programs is not only demonstrated by the number of the project beneficiaries and of the success of the Russian applicants in these programs, but also by the very high financial commitment of the Russian Federation, because Russia puts the equivalent of the external EU funds into the programs, as you can see it as well on this slide. So, like for example, indeed, it would be half of the EU funds, more or less, which are put into each and every program. And there, of course, there's also other co-financing which comes into picture by the member states themselves in some cases. Let's continue with let's switch to the future, because I understand that you are very much as well interested on what is going to happen in the future. So let's go to further one slide. The programs on the EU external borders with the neighborhood countries and with the Russian Federation are supposed to continue as well in the future. The big difference, let's say, will be that whereas currently they are governed by the external relations legal framework mostly, which is inspired by the cohesion policy, in the future they will be fully embedded in the what we call the Interreg family and the cohesion policy rules. So the daily management and the daily rules for implementation will be even closer in the future to the internal Interreg programs than it is the case now. We very much hope that by this move we will on one hand simplify the life of some of the beneficiaries, namely in the member states who are familiar with Interreg as such. But at the same time, we strongly hope that this will bring closer the external cooperation programs to the internal programs and other regional development programs which are there and which are financed as well by the EU. In the future, the programs are proposed to be called Interreg Next. Highlighting the external dimension of the Interreg programs. We would very much as well, we are very much inciting and encouraging the programs to be in line and to take into account the objectives of the macro-regional and other strategies which are covering the territories of these programs, like, for example, the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region or the Arctic policy, which is also a very important strategic source. And we also understand that the programs are going to take into account the Russian strategic documents and development strategies. If we can move to the next slide, please.
You have 1 more minute.
Okay, point taken. So in the future, the programs will be asked to contribute to the menu of 5 policy objectives, which is proposed for the full range of the European structural and investment funds or European structural funds. There are certain rules which will oblige them to focus the support into maximum of 3 out of 5 policy objectives, 60% of the EU funds. At the same time, each program will have to invest into the greener Europe, which is the policy objective 2, which is by far one of the very strong EU priorities for the future. And maybe just a last point that on top of the existing cooperation programs with the Russian Federation, so the 7 ENI CBC programs plus the participation of Russia in the Baltic Sea region program, the Russian Federation has also expressed the interest to participate in other cooperation programs, for example, the Interreg Next Black Sea Basin programs. So it is foreseen that this cooperation is even enlarged to other programs. So that would be all, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Simona, for this very insightful presentation on what we should expect as the next steps in EU-Russia cross-border cooperation. I'm going now to give you back the floor to the three of you to have a discussion, I think, along 2 lines. One, if we can go a bit deeper into what drives the success of EU-Russia cross-border cooperation, what have been the major achievements in the past years, and based on this aspect, what recommendations you would give to policymakers working on fields other than cross-border cooperation. So what lessons can we take from this experience? I will start from Elizaveta in the same order we had, and the floor is yours.
Well, when I thought about recommendations from my project experience, I think I would firstly think about the right project consortium and about the partners involved. I would really recommend, and I'm very glad that in our project case, all the partners were very much dedicated. And I would advise not to look upon the project partner selection just formally, just to reach some number or something like that, but really to find those that will be working next to you, because project does not open, or any initiative doesn't close when the project is over, but it should go on, and it doesn't also close when you finish at 6 p.m. and close the computer. So the project partners, that would be number 1. Also, I think that communication, internal and external, and coordination is very much important when handling different financial things, and also when achieving your goals, because you very often the main drivers are not only the beneficiaries, but somebody next door, or other partners, other project. I think that looking around as wide as possible is also very much important. And what else? I would also recommend also to talk as much as possible to the target groups, and doing something not for them but with the target groups, because you cannot make somebody happy just on your own. You need to cooperate and move on with the target groups. What else? It also helped us a lot to look upon the project not as something predetermined, because a lot of things are changing while you are moving on with the project implementation. And we were very thankful for our MA coordination and assistance, because thanks to some changes in the original project plan, we gained a lot of new benefits in the project and for the society. And the project looks like more stable and more life after the project is already over. So I think that as for the recommendations for the project implementation, these are the most important things and lessons learned.
Thank you very much, Elizaveta. I will now give the floor for Jukka.
Okay, I can only say that I agree with Elizaveta with all these issues you mentioned, and I will continue starting from the same thoughts that I already in my presentation showed a couple of bullet points, the most important things I feel that in this programming work and in general between two countries, between EU and Russia, that we must trust each other. It's obvious, otherwise we cannot work together. We cannot go over the borders by car, by cycles, whatever. We can't do that without trust. And then we must discuss with each other, not be quiet and say that I do not discuss with you because I don't like you. It does not work like that. And then we must make everything happen at the concrete level. If we discuss, we agree, we must make it happen. I mean that like cultural projects with the disabled people. We must make it happen in practice. That's important. And then some thoughts, not any recommendations, but thoughts I would offer to decision makers to think about themselves, that there is always problems between the countries, within the countries. It's like a family, like indirect family, that at homes you have problems with your own family. Whenever you say to your children that you are not allowed to eat 10 ice creams today, you face these problems and you just overcome them, explain what to do. And based on that, that there is always problems, decision makers must support the local level actors like programs and projects and people here to go over these problems, not to stop collaboration because of problems. And help us, support us here, close the borders at local levels. This is what I want decision makers think. The role of decision makers is to support, not deny. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jukka, for these remarks. And now I'll turn to Simona for her answers, comments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Domenico. I agree what my pre-speakers already mentioned from their perspective. I understand that their view on the EU level. Obviously, we need to look at the conclusions and at, for example, Council conclusions on the 5 guiding principles on the EU policy towards Russia. This is the framework, the general framework that we operate in, and as you know, and as it has been certainly said, these programs are let's say that they are allowed under that framework. We, from our side, we believe that for the EU and Russia, we should really concentrate on the issues and themes of mutual interest. We understand that, for example, the Green Deal and the green issues and the climate change would be an example of a theme of a mutual interest. We also understand that the menu that we offered for the programs in the future is also relevant and important for this kind of cooperation with the Russian Federation. So this would be one of the prerequisites for this cooperation to happen, that it has to be based on mutual interest, on a win-win, and we have a very strong, let's say, signals that it is, because the Russian Federation keeps to be committed, and the programs are proposed for the future from our side as well. Nevertheless, there are some important principles that the legal framework sets, and that we want to the programs to be, that we want that the program stakeholders observe. For example, the involvement of the socio-economic partners and civil society in the development and implementation of these programs, or certain observation of the certain environmental rules that we have, like, for example, the strategic environmental assessment rules. And we do see that it is possible. It is possible if we are insisting that the programs are observing these standards and these practices. But we also think that it is very important, and this is the recommendation also for our side, that we provide the tools and the guidance which is necessary for these programs, so that they can follow what we would like them to observe. Let's say another lesson learned from the past is that these programs, overall, the territorial cooperation programs are perceived as being quite complex. It's not easy to set joint programs and joint projects. It has been already said, it requires trust, it requires time to set the partnership, to develop the partnership. So one of the recommendations that we got from the previous evaluations, for example, was that try to simplify as much as possible the delivery of the programs. On one hand for the program partners, and on the other hand for the beneficiaries. So we have inserted a range of simplification measures, and we very strongly hope that the beneficiaries and the programs will make use of them, like, for example, to use simplified options how to report the project costs, like just to give one example. And last but not least, we also strongly believe that it is still important to build the capacity, the administrative capacity of the beneficiaries and the potential beneficiaries on one hand, and on the other hand, still to invest further in the trust building measures. Because it has been stressed by the previous speakers, trust building and confidence building is a prerequisite and a very essential part of these programs, but more can still be done. So for that purpose, we have introduced what we call interreg-specific objective on governance, which is aimed exactly that, so that the programs address the administrative capacity building, support to civil society, support to democratic development. And we are strongly encouraging the programs that they support and they make use of this objective, and they support these measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simona. I'm not going to use my privilege of moderation for asking questions right now. I see that there is already one question from the chat box. I'm not sure whether Vera would like to ask the question herself. In this case, I will read the question. I think this is a question addressed to Simona, since this is about the projects that support the Black Sea region. What are these projects and how are they supported by European institutions?
Mm-hmm. Should I go on? Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, the Black Sea Basin program is one of the 15 ENI CBC programs that are currently running and that also continue from the previous period. So there has been already an ENPI program. It is a program which covers currently, I believe, 8 countries around the Black Sea Basin, 3 member states, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and 5, for the time being, Eastern Partnership or Eastern Neighbourhood countries, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia. Azerbaijan is as well eligible but is not participating, and the enlargement country, namely Turkey. So it is a very interesting sea basin cooperation program, which is also very successful. It supports projects in the area of the support to biodiversity, green issues, cleaning the Black Sea, because there are very important environmental issues which the program needs to address. And for the future, the Russian Federation has expressed its wish to join the program, and the program will very much be asked to be aligned to what we call the EU Common Maritime Agenda, which is part of the Black Sea Synergy political initiative, which is covering all these countries, including Russia. So in that framework and using really the objectives of the Common Maritime Agenda, the Russian Federation is interested to participate as well in this cooperation, and for the time being, the program is being prepared. And once the conditions are in place, once the legal framework is finally adopted, the primary legislation and the secondary legislation, we hope very much that by the end of the year, the program could be submitted officially to the Commission and hopefully adopted at the beginning of the next year. I hope that addresses the question.
Thank you very much, Simona. I see that there is a comment from Daria, actually. I'm not sure whether she would like to share it. Voice. I will take in this case the opportunity to ask 2 questions. One on actually, I want to build on what was said in our keynote on the role of cities and urban in cross-border cooperation. What I would like to know, the analysis we had was an analysis until 2013, which emphasized the important role of the emphasis, let's say, on urban cooperation. So my question is whether this has changed or remained the same, where we are now in terms of urban, rural, in cross-border cooperation, based on your perspective. And the other question I have is on the future, actually, and I was wondering whether in the priorities, in the future priorities of cross-border cooperation, where culture would fall, in which priority cultural cooperation, for instance, or cultural heritage would fall. This is maybe a question more for Simona, I guess. I don't know, who would like to start?
Do you mean that one of us speakers could answer? I don't know. I can say some about the urban-rural issue, that I feel that, of course, you can divide program area into the rural and urban areas, but I feel that I see more potential in rural areas because it's untouched that much yet, and there is opportunities for renewable energy more than urban areas, and there is potential for environmental protection, tourism, and especially for SMEs to get new business compared to urban areas. Of course, these are included in urban areas too. And also the smart issues, digitalization, what is remote work, and then net-related businesses. There is a lot opportunities for not so crowded areas, and then it might bring some potential to increase population, and in these unpopulated areas, less populated areas compared to urban. I don't know. We are somehow forced to divide areas to different categories, but maybe we should only talk more about the program area. When we are talking about CBC programs, program area, we have human resources, we have natural resources, and we as a small actor among the number of other actors in this program area, we can push things a bit forward, giving some funding for good proposals and projects. But for the whole program area, not dividing them. Of course, this is my thinking and maybe naive thinking too. Thanks.
Thank you, Jukka. I see that Simona would like to take the question on cultural cooperation.
I can actually add a few points about the territorial question as well, because just to remind that these programs are called European territorial cooperation. So indeed, they should be what we call place-based. So each program territory is unique. It has its unique, let's say, territorial features. Some of them are more rural, some of them are more urban. And the idea is that each and every program does or invests in issues which are suited to the purpose of the program area. And on the EU level, there are some tools which could be used for the different types of areas. We have some tools which are more suited to the urban development, to the urban, let's say, environment. Some of them which are more for the rural, which are inspired by the rural funding, EU rural funds. They are a bit more difficult to use in the cooperation context, because obviously in the cooperation programs, the basic obligation is always that you need to have this cooperation dimension on board. So every project, everything must have the cross-border effect. But we do have, for example, if you have a city on the border, and that exists in some, namely in the internal EU, then you can use certain tools, for example, to develop the twin cities together. For example, that's called integrated territorial investment instrument. But let me get more into the culture and cultural heritage, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. It is clear that the sector of culture and tourism as well was very much and very strongly hit, obviously in the EU, but also outside in the non-EU countries. And this has been reflected, and under the new legal framework, there is an explicit mentioning of the support to culture and tourism under the so-called policy objective 4, more inclusive Europe. So within this policy objective, it will be possible to support culture and tourism more specifically, but you should always have a bit in mind that the focus should be on the skills and on the jobs, because this is the main aim of the policy objective for more inclusive Europe.
Thank you very much, Simona, for the precise answer on this, on which priority is related to culture. Coming back to the previous question, I'm not sure whether, I know that Elizaveta is going to leave a bit earlier. Would you like to add something? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, well, once we mentioned the culture and cultural heritage, just a remark that we are sharing many common challenges, and those mentioned rural and small cities, and the difference in population and aging population, and there are some political tensions also mentioned today. And just being the manager of a culture project, I would like to stress that culture and preserving culture heritage and lessening social tension and taking care of those vulnerable, that is something to be considered. And unfortunately, I looked at the charts in the beginning of our meeting and provided by Alexander, that culture and heritage total and tourism, by the way, they're decreasing as a priority a little bit, and probably that is due to COVID, as also is said, but taking care of values important for all people. The culture is probably one of the best way to reach our goals of joining people together. So it would be good if in the next strategic documents, cooperation documents, culture and tourism will be one of the priorities. Yeah, just a small remark about that.
Thank you very much, Elizaveta. I will use again maybe my privilege as a moderator to ask one question on, let's say, the organizations that have access to funding. I imagine this is a very diverse group, since it involves public and private actors, academia, enterprises. What I would like to know is there a trend in the access to funding based on your experience? Is this more about public organizations that have access to funding? Is this more academia? What would you say about it?
Well, based on what we have observed during the last few years when the project was running, the program is getting more and more popular, and the visibility plays its role in the society. People start feeling the benefits of the program, of the cooperation. And there are a lot of more and more partners in the project consortiums that are the new in the cross-border cooperation, and they get also hand-on experience of doing things, and they are wishing and willing to apply in the next calls already as lead partners, for example. And also we could see on the charts that in some programs there are very, very few lead partners on the Russian side, and most of them are on the Finnish side. So I think that on the Russian side they are getting more and more hand-on experience and more interest and more trust to those programs. So if several years ago they were just the key actors who applied and were interested, right now we see that a lot of NGOs are starting and thinking about their own initiatives and project ideas and cooperation. Also, we are moving a lot as a university to the urban territories and networking, and those are also willing to apply for some funding. So the variety of type of organizations, if that is what your question is growing, and during the last several years it rapidly decreased. Even some physical just persons are looking for other for different possibilities for funding. So things are changing.
Elizaveta, and you, Simona, would you like to have a few words on this question of variety?
Maybe I can say some words about funding. The same observations we have, like Elizaveta, that of course universities, they are extremely experienced applying funds and funding for all kind of projects. So they receive quite a lot also from our program. And then public sector, the same. They are used to apply for funding and used to deal with the public funding instruments. And the business side, especially SMEs, they know about these instruments, but they do not have time for apply. For example, when you start to develop an application, it takes time about 6, 7, 8, 9 months to start your proposed project, if everything goes well. So SME companies, private companies probably do not have that much time to wait to start to implement an idea, a project to develop. But the one reason is that why we do not have that much business side actors and probably NGOs too, it's about ourselves. We should work more intensively to attract more and wider audience to our program. It's about us too, quite strongly. Thanks.
If I may just a little compliment, we as a commission, we are not involved directly in the contact with the beneficiaries. But in the future program period, 2021-2027, there is a strong push for the Interreg programs to involve smaller scale beneficiaries, local level beneficiaries. There is indeed now it is compulsory for every cross-border cooperation program to invest in some sort of small-scale operations, either through what we call Small Projects Fund, which is a specific instrument for the cooperation programs, which supports micro projects on very local level, like really low value projects, or these can be, it's not really defined how big a project should be in order to be a small scale project. We can consider that since below 200,000 euros, there are some rules for obligatory use of simplified cost options, that this would be more or less some sort of a benchmark or threshold. But it is really, the incentive was really that these programs try to attract as well beneficiaries which do not have capacities to submit project applications which tend to be, or we understand then tend to be quite labor intensive. So some sort of a simplified framework for the local level, especially through these small project funds, because there the requirements are simplified for the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and clarification. Also, how the programs are changing. I invite participants to write their questions if they have them, and perhaps I will move to another points, which is the challenges ahead. We have now a new multi-annual financial framework. We have a new political situation. And what I would like to know is what is, in your view, the main challenge to address in cross-border cooperation in your view? What are the major challenges that you think they should be addressed? This is again a question for the speakers, so feel free to jump in.
Okay, I can start with the key challenge. Actually, it's a difficulty, not only a challenge. A time frame to develop a new program period. We have been doing quite a lot of time and involving a lot, not audience, but stakeholders, and it takes time, and how to push everything further as planned, it is a difficult task. And at the same time, we should develop nice, interesting program that will attract new and current applicants and partners. And one of the very important is to find out what is the most interesting and important for our program area. We can say that smart, green, better connected, but it's pretty wide. Topic includes almost everything, but find the very clue and very differentiating issue for our program. It is challenging and difficult task. But generally, everything goes quite fluently. We enjoy and everything is fine, but difficult at the same time.
Thank you, Jukka. I see that Elizaveta has to leave, so perhaps I will give quick the floor to her for concluding thoughts.
I would just like to thank everybody, the participants, and also the organizers, and especially the speakers in our panel. That was very nice to meet all of you and to share our experience. And the more we work, the less challenges we have. We are improving, and I hope to stay in touch. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizaveta. Thank you.
Okay, I can, if you want me to thank you, Elizaveta. It was nice meeting you, although only virtually, but let's hope that there will be times when we will be able to see projects again, and it would be very interesting to visit your project for sure.
Thank you very much. You're always welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And on the, let's say, on the challenges side, from my side, from the EU level, well, obviously we cannot deny that there are some challenges which are related to the political context. Not necessarily in the cross-border cooperation programs with Russia, but especially in this sea basin kind of cooperation context. But we stress it again and again that these programs are aimed to be apolitical and really addressed grassroots cooperation and this way to improve directly the quality of lives of the people in the border areas. But of course, there are also some operational challenges that we see which are related to these programs. It has been already mentioned that in order to build a cooperation program, you need time, trust, and all these things it takes time and energy to develop them. And we would very much like that this time round, the new programs 21-27, that they are adopted as soon as possible so that the beneficiaries have enough time to implement the projects. Because there are also projects, some of the programs will invest in infrastructure projects, and they, by very nature, they take time to prepare them, to implement them. There are works involved. So we would very much like that it is possible to start the implementation on time. On our side, we as well know that we have our own homeworks. We need to prepare, for example, some templates which the programs will use. We need to prepare a template for a so-called financing agreement, which is some sort of an agreement between the EU and the Russian Federation, which is translating the rules, the EU legal rules, into the Russia context. So, so there are all these challenges ahead of us, because obviously there are many priorities that we have, and we need to focus and to make the efforts so that these programs are really adopted on time, and they can flourish as soon as possible. Thank you as well.
Thank you very much, Yuka, Simona. If we don't have enough questions, perhaps I would just ask you to give some concluding remarks on this first panel. Well, I learned a lot. I'm very interested in this topic, so it was an amazing opportunity to have practitioners from project program headquarters that could give us insights on the results of the cross-border cooperation in the last multi-annual financial framework. Some projects, of course, are still ongoing. In the future, of course, which priorities will we see? I see that the vocabulary is of the cross-border cooperation is adjusting to the priorities of the new Commission. Based on this discussion, I would invite our speaker for some quick concluding remarks. Would you like perhaps with changes? Would you like Simona to start, and then we move to Yuka?
Why not? Thank you very much. Well, I think, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a very interesting exchange for me as well. With Yuka, we are in sort of regular contact because his program is one of the very successful programs that our unit is also in charge of. I think what is important is that these programs, as they are one of the few remaining platforms for the EU-Russia cooperation, and also the bilateral cooperation between member states and the Russian Federation, that these remain open, that this channel of communication remains open despite the political difficulties that there are. We are on our side, on the Commission side, we are trying to make all the possible what we can to make it happen, to accompany the current programs as well as the preparation of the future programs. It is of course not always easy, because the rules that we have are mainly made for the cooperation within the member states. So the rules not always take into account the specificities of the external cooperation. They do it to a certain extent, and we do believe that we managed to insert the main let's say, issues and features which are necessary for these programs to work. But the programs will have to adjust a bit to the next legal framework in the future. And we will, on our side, we will try to do our best to accompany them in this process of accommodating to the new legal rules, and to see them, as I said, to see them adopted at the beginning of the next year, and start the implementation, fully fledged implementation in the next year. And for that, I wish them a big success, and looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. Jukka, would you like to add some remarks to conclude?
Two things. This kind of event we can see as a result of cross-border collaboration. Now we are able to see and meet each other and discuss, and this increases trust between the people, and it's the ground and fundament for everything, people and trust between them. And at least I am, and I believe that everybody is very ambitious for the future, see what is happening and great opportunity to be a part of this, creating a new program and developing the future for our region. It's really interesting and difficult task, but we hope that we can do that. Thanks a lot for this event.
Thank you very much, Simona, Jukka. I think we probably need, thousands of micro cross-border cooperation programs to authentically build trust. Thank you very much. I want to thank once again Simona Polova, Jukka Bergman, and Elizaveta Druzhinina for their participation, for being with us, for sharing their thoughts. I'm going to give some practical information to the participants. We are now going to a break. We will reconvene here in 15 minutes for the last panel discussion on what we should expect for the future, the challenges, and once again, thank you very much for your participation, and let's hope for a great cross-border cooperation 2021-2027. Thank you.
Dear participants, dear speakers, welcome everyone to our second and final panel of today's webinar on EU-Russia cross-border cooperation. For those who are joining the webinar only now, let me introduce myself. I am Fabienne Bossuet. I'm a professorial fellow at UNUCRIS, and I'm also co-director of the Russia platform of Ghent University. And I will be moderating this second panel. Let me also provide you with some technical information and instructions. As attendees of this panel, I would like to ask you not to turn on your microphone during the session unless you're explicitly given the floor. If you'd like to ask questions to the speakers, then you can use the chat to do that. Normally, we'll keep the final half an hour of the panel for answering the questions that you may have for the speakers. So throughout the discussion, feel free to already post your questions or your comments in the chat. Let's now move to the topic of this panel. So in today's webinar, we are discussing cross-border cooperation between the EU and Russia. The goal of this webinar is to build awareness of cross-border cooperation as a rather rare case of constructive engagement between the European Union and Russia against the background of a bilateral relationship that remains in deep crisis. In the first panel, the aim was really to share best practices, to look at some concrete examples of projects in order to better understand how EU-Russia cross-border cooperation works on the ground and also what drives its success. in the second panel, we will shift the focus from the practitioners level to the political level. So in the first panel, the practitioners have already shared with us some concrete lessons that can be learned from these best practices of cross-border cooperation. They also pointed to the factors that in their view contribute to the success of cross-border cooperation between the EU and Russia, which is actually currently one of a few areas of constructive cooperation between the EU and Russia. Now let's discuss these issues from a political point of view rather than a practitioner's point of view. The discussion in this panel will be structured along 4 sets of questions. First of all, what role does cross-border play in EU-Russia relations more generally? Secondly, how can we explain that cross-border cooperation is still in place despite strong tensions between the EU and Russia? Thirdly, which lessons can we learn from the positive examples of EU-Russia cross-border cooperation for EU-Russia relations more generally? And fourthly and finally, what limitations does EU-Russia cross-border cooperation have in terms of acting as a best practice for other fields of cooperation between the EU and Russia? Now, to discuss these questions, we have 3 prominent speakers who will share with us their views on these issues. First of all, we have Professor Andrei Makarichev. Professor Makarichev is Professor of Regional Political Studies at the Johann Skytte Institute of Political Science at the University of Tartu. He is also a guest professor at the Center for Global Politics at the Free University in Berlin, and he's senior associate with SIDOP think tank in Barcelona. Professor Makarichev teaches courses on globalization, also on political systems in post-Soviet Eurasia, also on EU-Russia relations, also on regionalism and integration in the post-Soviet era, and also on visual politics. He has co-authored already several books. In recent years, he has co-authored 3 monographs, namely Celebrating Borderlands in a Wider Europe, namely Nations and Identities in Ukraine, Georgia, and Estonia. He's also co-authored a book, Lotman's Cultural Semiotics and the Political. And finally, he's also co-authored in recent years the book Critical Biopolitics of Post-Soviet, From Populations to Nations. Then our next speaker is Honorary Ambassador Mark Franco. Mr. Franco is currently Senior Associate Fellow at the Ekman Institute. He's a former head of the European Commission's delegation to Russia, a position that he held from 2004 till 2009. Previously, he was also the head of the EU delegation to Egypt, namely from 2009 till 2012. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Krzysztof Gitzik. Mr. Gitzik is the head of the Russian Federation section at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland. He has a BA and MA degree in history, and he also studied Slavic studies, namely Croatian, at Gdansk University. He has been working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs since 2016, when he graduated from the Diplomatic Academy under the auspices of the MFA of Poland. Initially, he was dealing with Polish-Russian bilateral issues at the Russian Federation section of the MFA. After that, he was posted to the Consulate General in St. Petersburg, namely from 2007 till 2019, before he returned to the headquarters in 2019. He has been holding his current position since January 2020. Now, without further ado, let's start the discussion. So the first set of questions focuses on the role that cross-border cooperation plays in EU-Russia relations. As we all know, EU-Russia relations remain in deep crisis. Most would argue that the nature of this crisis is geopolitical. Professor Makarichev, I would like to give you the floor first, and I would like to ask you to share with us your view on this question. Could you highlight how we should understand the current relationship between the EU and Russia? And then also how cross-border cooperation as a rather well-functioning mode of cooperation between the EU and Russia should be seen against the background of what is really a highly contested and conflictual EU-Russia relationship. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fabienne, for introducing me and for giving me floor, for inviting me. It's always nice to come back to this issue that we have discussed for years, if not decades. And let me share with you some of my ideas that stem from my interest to the most recent developments in relations between Russia and the European Union. Starting from the Joseph Borrell's visit to Moscow, which is basically considered as a failure story. Then I would say, demonstrative expulsion of several diplomats of EU member states from Russia, followed by new sanctions against Russia, and the declaration by Russian foreign minister of Russia's readiness to disrupt or discontinue relations with the European Union. So these events, they form a kind of a chain that I think is politically very consequential, but academically, it's also an interesting object of research and study. And the question I'm trying to ask myself is how much this disruption of relations or crisis in relations between Moscow and Brussels affects countries that share border with Russia, border located countries or borderland countries. And here I find not only the importance of border as a political factor, but also some kind of ambiguities and some kind of controversies that I think need to be elucidated further. And in this sense, in fact, countries that share border with Russia, they are of particular importance, because many of them would definitely say that they possess a unique experience and expertise on Russia, on the one hand. On the other hand, these countries are the most vulnerable and the most politically sensitive to Russia's policies. And I think kind of a juxtaposition of Finland and Estonia might serve as a good illustration of this argument, and exactly something which illustrates this ambiguity as well. Finland is known as a country that a long time ago launched the Northern Dimension, and Estonia is known as a country that is consistently appealing to the EU member states and the EU in a more general sense to be more critical and more vigilant towards Russia and its foreign policy intentions. And we also know that the Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto traveled to St. Petersburg immediately after Borrell's visit, well, I would say even in spite of the results of this visit. And in the meantime, Estonian Foreign Minister made a couple of critical points or comments concerning Borrell's trip. So we see this distinction. I think it constitutes just one part of the problem of whether the crisis in relations between Moscow and Brussels opens, let's say, a new diversity of individual member states' policies towards Russia. I think my argument here is that indeed the crisis in EU-Russia relations does create some kind of fertile ground for multiple policy initiatives, but in the meantime also for multiple asymmetries in foreign policy tactics and diplomatic style. Even if this is about style, I think this is also important. And again, the juxtaposition of Finland and Estonia seems to be quite interesting, because the roots of these, let's say, distinctions that I have briefly mentioned are structural, and many of them date back to the fall of the Soviet Union, an event that brought economic losses to Finland and the political freedom to Estonia. So definitely you see this political context as something which matters. I will just briefly develop on Estonian experiences of looking at Russia as a geographical neighbor, as a country that share a border with Russia. Well, in a general sense, Estonian policy towards Russia are very much driven by Russian official discourse that consistently accuses Baltic states hosting sizable Russian minorities of political and linguistic discrimination. And what I would like to draw your attention to is that in Lavrov's interview in which he explained the reasons behind this declaration of discontinuation of relations with the European Union. Russian Foreign Ministry explicitly, again, and I would say in a very confrontational way, mentioned the three Baltic states as one of the elements of Russia's unhappiness with the European Union in general, which basically, in my reading, again, means that unfortunately Moscow did not fully and unconditionally accept the integration of Baltic states into the European Union, into, let's say, this transatlantic West. And instead, Russia tries to kind of distinguish them as a different group or a different sort of countries within the European Union. And against this background, definitely Estonia faces a challenge. And the challenge is about finding a balance between, let's say, on the one hand, criticizing Russian foreign policy on normative issues and on other issues as well, on the one hand, and in the meantime, keeping open a bilateral of Russia, which includes a very important transborder, cross-border the territorial integrity of such Crimea. These issues seem to be quite important in the Estonian UN Security Council agenda, and that's also translated or projected on, for example, a session convened by Estonia to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Second World War in Europe, which basically also contains a quite clear reference to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and the way how borders have been violated in this historical perspective. So this focusing on the concept of border seems to be quite intentional and quite well accentuated. But in the meantime, there is also, as I mentioned, the second part of the story. And the second part of the story is about multiple attempts or experiments to develop Estonia's own tracks of relations with Russia. For example, Estonian President Kersti Kaljulaid in April 2019 visited Moscow and met Putin, and even invited him to attend the Finno-Ugric Congress, the World Finno-Ugric Congress that have been rescheduled from the last year to, well, say, to future, with a proposal to continue with the ratification of the border treaty. Estonia is one of the only country in the UN NATO that does not have a ratified border treaty with Russia, which is, of course, politically speaking, might constitute a problem. Of course, the fact that the new Estonian government decided to raise this issue in the very first couple of weeks being in power basically is motivated by domestic considerations of trying to present themselves as a pragmatic and trustworthy and functional team. But still, political importance here is also there. And in Estonian expert circles, there are different voices who would support the idea of developing bilateral track of dealing with Russia. I'll just give you one quotation that I found quite interesting. It comes from Karelia from European Council of Foreign Relations, who wrote a few weeks ago, should a Russian fighter jet crash over Lithuania or a NATO one lose a missile over Estonia, both of which have happened It would be good for the capitals concerned to exchange information directly, as opposed to relying solely on the link between NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe and the Chief of the Russian General Staff. Not to mention more mundane business between neighbors, from the civilized delinking of electricity grids and maintaining transport links to handling COVID-19 and searching for Prosha, the Russian bear who strayed into Estonia and was safely returned home. End quotation. So that's what I can say on this part of the story. And one more small addition to this geopolitical story, and this comes from the COVID-19 situation and the border lockdown, something which I would conceptualize more from a biopolitical perspective, because it's about pandemic and it's about these restrictions that became part of our everyday life since last March. So the question I'm asking myself is how this dynamic related to the pandemic, how it relates and how much it adds to all these complexities that I have referred to earlier. As I see it, the major trend here is the adherence of borderland countries to the principles, norms, and regulations existing within the European Union, as opposed to striking individual deal with Russia. What is on the surface is that, for example, in Estonia, the issue of reopening border with Russia is a part of EU policy towards Russia. And I think in Finland, the situation looks pretty much the same. And in general speaking, the perspective of reopening the border is not that very high in the political agenda in Estonia. And both countries, including Finland, of course, they are very much in favor of a common EU approach to this matter. And another issue which I think is quite also important is none of these countries shaping borders with Russia accepted, as for example, as Hungary did, Sputnik V for vaccination. The general argument here is that it's up to EMA to professionally decide on the quality of Russian vaccine, again, as opposed to individual decisions in member states. And I think this trend is also should be taken into account when analyzing these complex interconnections of geopolitical and more recent biopolitical dynamics. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for a rather extensive outline. But of course, you're touching there upon some very important issues, especially if we then look at it from the perspective of the so-called bordering countries. Now, Estonia is one such case. Finland is another such case. In a short while, we'll move on to another case, namely Poland, and then we'll hear it firsthand from a diplomat. So you're really touching there upon some very important issues when we're dealing with well, the broader question, of course, of EU-Russia cooperation, because especially if we're talking about border cooperation, cross-border cooperation, of course, this only is between those bordering countries, including Estonia, including Finland, and also Poland. So they are, of course, the main beneficiaries and the main stakeholders. I would like to now turn to the second set of questions, which is on the question how we can explain that this cross-border cooperation is still in place and is actually rather successful, despite having such strong tensions between the EU and Russia at a higher diplomatic level. And for this question, I would like to turn to Mr. Mark Franco. Mr. Franco, I would like to ask you if you can perhaps from your experience, but also because you're still looking into these issues as you're now affiliated to the Ekman Institute. So how would you say can we explain that this cross-border cooperation is taking place and is rather successful, despite or against this background of a very conflictual and contested relation between the EU and Russia?
Okay, thank you, Fabian, for giving me the floor. I'm not sure I have the replies to your question, but what I would like to do, rather than directly reply, is indirectly reply by trying to understand what cross-border cooperation, in fact, what it is about, how it came into being, and what in fact the meaning is at this moment, and also then possibly what role it can play in future. Because this morning we had very interesting discussions where we looked at various project examples, case studies of how cross-border cooperation functioned. But above the micro level, that means the project level, the implementation of the project, there is a kind of an overall macro environment in which these projects are identified, developed, and be implemented. So I think it's interesting to go back to where cross-border cooperation started and why it started. And then we have to go back to the 1990s, which is, I would say, the kind of the wonder years of the European Union, because before 1990, the European Union was not much more than a customs union with a common agricultural policy. And in the 1990s, we have the entry into force of the common market in 93. We have the Maastricht Treaty also in 93. We have the beginning of the implementation of the Schengen agreements in 95. And what we see is that, in fact, the European Union at that moment is kind of taking away its borders. Borders are becoming irrelevant. They are becoming irrelevant for the transporting of goods, and they're becoming irrelevant also for visiting people. So we're moving a little bit in the direction of this, this ever closer union between the countries of Europe, but it is not enough to take out the borders in order to stimulate directly, let's say, cooperation across this border. This border still constitutes a kind of a break in the economic landscape. Border regions are outlying regions. They're very often forgotten by their capitals and very often a little bit less developed than the rest of the country. And it is a discontinuity also because these border regions have been cutting apart people that very often are from the same linguistic and cultural background, but that have been separated for decades, if not for centuries. And for this reason, and also, I mean, for a double reason, in fact, the European Union started looking at these projects, at these regions. First of all, from a cohesion point of view, because, I mean, as you probably know, if you've studied the history of European Union, the regional funds, the cohesion activities in the European Union multiplied by a factor 3 between the 80s and the 90s because of the entry into force of the common market. So developing border regions that are less developed than the rest of the country is part of this this objective. Secondly, as I said, borders are becoming irrelevant, but it doesn't mean that across the border automatically the cooperation starts booming. So an effort has to be made in order to take away this discontinuity in the geographical map of Europe. So we have Interreg, cross-border cooperation within the European Union in order to finish this kind of job of taking away the importance of borders. And then very soon afterwards, when it becomes clear that the countries of Central Europe will become member states of the European Union, this activity is extended to them, because there, of course, the split is already is even more severe than it is between the member states of the European Union. We are making an effort from the early 1990s onwards in order to also develop cross-border cooperation with these countries in Central Europe, because they will be part of the Union, they will be part of this, what is supposed to be a kind of a continuous area, region, European region of cooperation and integration. 2004, the entry of these new member states in the European Union, we get new borders. What does Mr. Prodi, President Prodi says? We don't want new dividing lines. We want new dividing lines in Central Europe. We want, in fact, there also extend the influence of the European Union with the neighborhood programs. And with the neighborhood programs comes also the extension of cross-border cooperation to the countries of Central Europe that participate in the neighborhood programs. Russia is then a bit, of course, a case apart, because whereas for Russia does not participate in neighborhood programs, but nevertheless Russia is included in the and is interested in implementing the cross-border cooperation program. From the beginning, there has been a bit of a problem. I mean, I happened to be in Moscow when some of these programs were being negotiated, because it is kind of, it went against a number of basic principles underlying Russian policy. First of all, it is kind of very decentralized to the regions. The center doesn't really have full control of what happens in the regions, what projects are being implemented, how they're being implemented. And secondly, this morning we also mentioned the issue of symmetry. Now, in the implementation, there is a high degree of symmetry between the European Union partners and the Russian partners, but at the same time, the management authorities still are in the member states. So this is something that went down very well in Russia, but in the end they accepted. So then you see that Russia, that has been quite reluctant to engage with the European Union in the neighborhood policy, nevertheless does engage in the cross-border cooperation program, and with the time does it in an increasingly, I would always say, enthusiastic and efficient manner, which means that we can say that that this is possibly an example, that is possibly a starting point that we can further build upon in the cooperation with Russia, because it is very interesting to see that neither the European Union nor Russia has proposed to scrap the cross-border cooperation program. In 2014, when relations between Russia and the European Union were interrupted. And so it is interesting now to ask ourselves the question, why did neither the European Union nor Russia think about scrapping the program? That means that there was a kind of an interest on both sides in maintaining the program. Interest of the European Union for developing border regions, I think, is the same as it was for already in the cross-border cooperation programs before. Member states of the European Union were used to this because they were already practicing this cross-border cooperation and benefiting from the results of cross-border cooperation from the early 90s onwards. For Russia, of course, it's a little bit more complex, and I'm not sure that I have a full explanation of why Russia so enthusiastically, after a while, engaged in the programs and persisted in continuing to implement them. Yes, there is an interest, of course, in the Baltic region, the Baltic Sea region. The Baltic Sea is important for Russia, not only because, of course, it is the access to St. Petersburg port, but also because the Baltic countries are kind of a natural transit area for Russia exports and for imports to Russia. It's part of the let's say the economic tissue there. Could be better than it is now, because of course there is a lot of tension and this has been interrupted. There is an interest on both sides from Russia and the European Union in the environmental aspects in the Baltic Sea. But also there, the question is, and I don't have really the full reply to this, how come on the Russian side, where there is a clearly centralized political system that wants to control everything, that they continue enthusiastically to engage in a program where a lot of the decision-making power lies in the regions, is decentralized, and is implemented locally. So I think we have to continue to work on these issues and see why it is, and when understanding how this all operates, to see how we can build on it to further develop it in future. It is one of the only areas where there is a continuous cooperation between Russia and the European Union, and it could well be the stepping stone for further and more expansive, more expanded cooperation. Because of course, in order to be fully effective, these cross-border cooperation projects and programs need to be inscribed, need to be supported by let's say a more broader cooperation policy between Russia and the European Union, because that is what in the end will effectively, let's say, constitute their success.
Okay, thanks again for a very extensive and insightful overview, especially also going back, of course, to the, let's say, origins of the whole policy and why it came into place. Now, we will come back to some of these questions later on. And also, can it be a stepping stone for more enhanced cooperation in other fields? So this is, of course, a very important question. We will come back to that later on, but now I would first like to give the floor to our third speaker. As a representative from Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think it would be interesting if you could briefly outline the Polish experience with cross-border cooperation with Russia, and also how Poland is perceiving this cooperation. Now, Poland is known to have a rather difficult bilateral relationship with Russia, especially then politically. Also, when it comes to the EU's relations with Russia, we know that Poland tends to uphold a critical stance, in the sense that Poland believes that EU cooperation should be constrained under the current situation. That doesn't mean that Poland doesn't want any cooperation to take place, but at least that the cooperation should be rather limited, and also that the political dialogue with the Russian governments seems to be currently to little avail. Now, from this perspective, I would say it would be very interesting to hear from you. So how Poland has been experiencing cross-border cooperation with Russia, and also thinking ahead, how Poland is, or how Poland looks at the role of cross-border cooperation within the broader EU-Russia relations. So what role Poland sees for this type of cooperation at the background of a rather conflictual EU-Russia relationship. So I will open the floor, and so the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you again for giving me the floor, and I'd like to express my gratitude for the invitation for the conference. What you mentioned, I'm smiling because basically this is what I deal every day is usually the difficult matters. So Polish-Russian relations, the politics, EU-Russian relations, our history, differences on the history. So CBC remains a rare case when the positive side prevails. So our previous speakers asked some important questions, and this is also what I wanted to ask and briefly outline. It is important to understand why is that. When it comes, I fully agree with the view that we need to seek the roots in our overall relations in 90s or even earlier. But let me mention that what I'm talking about, it's not just an abstract construct so about some projects that are far away from Warsaw, from Brussels. I was born in Gdańsk and lived for several years in a small town 20 kilometers from the border, from the Russian border. And indeed, the 90s, both for Poland and for Russia, were difficult. What is important, what happened in 90s and early 2000 is that as a society, due to the changes, we lost interest in towards our close neighbors, so Russia, So when it became possible to travel to the Western Europe, and when traveling to Russia became more difficult, all these ties, the people-to-people ties, were maybe not entirely cut, but significantly limited. So having said that, the CBC program is about the people. So this is one of the tools that vastly help to facilitate the people-to-people context. It allowed to solve the very particular problems on the ground for both sides of the border. And this is probably one of the keys of its success. But also the bigger politics was mentioned here. And so let me shortly present a few remarks on EU-Russia relations that might be of importance for the discussion. What is, in my opinion, important to understand that the European Union is complicated and complex organism, and it's extremely difficult to understand from abroad. So this is also what we see when discussing particular CBC programs. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that I am a member of our joint programming committee and joint monitoring committee for the CBC program. So I see this discussions also from within, and this is also a unique experience. This is difficult to understand that the European way of thinking from one point of view, but it is also extremely important to have in mind that the CBC and the European Union, it is about the people, so about the people on the ground. And when it comes to our policy, we have various instruments of our neighborhood policy. So one of them is the Eastern Partnership, and about the difficulties when it comes to CBC. Not everyone knows that Eastern Partnership program was also offered towards to the Russia, but unfortunately rejected. So another one program or instrument that we have is the CBC, and it works both when it comes to Poland, to Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and then some other countries. Coming through to the more difficult issues. So when discussing the CBC programs, it is also important to have in mind that we cannot forget about the overall EU-Russia or Polish-Russian relations, the overall state. So we have a framework for these relations anonymously agreed. So this is the 5 guiding principles that was agreed in March 2016, and recently that has been reconfirmed by our ministers of foreign affairs, also anonymously. What I wanted to underline that this is neither Poland nor any other single capital that is shaping European policy towards Russia. It is our joint policy. It might be of attraction to say that, okay, Poland is guilty, that Estonia is guilty, that some other countries are, if not guilty, then somehow in favor of better relations. This is attractive idea, but from our point of view, it is not true at all. From our point of view, these 5 guiding principles, they provide us with enough tools to pursue successful policy towards Russia, and basing, of course, on the principles of the international law. So the more difficult these relations are between Poland or wider European Union and Russia. So I believe that the more important is to build the people-to-people contacts, and this is also what this CBC program is about. We are, of course, closely, as the European Union, as Poland, closely monitoring the situation in Russia. So we understand that nowadays the drill towards a fully fledged authoritarian regime is something that is of utmost concern. But we cannot forget about the people that lives in Russia. So we believe that it is the Russian civil society that has common interests with Europe, and be it democracy, be it climate, but it is the Russian civil society and in general the people on the ground that we have the policy towards. Going more concrete, when we look towards specific projects within the CBC, so in our case there are 3 pillars: so environment, heritage, and accessibility. So all these programs are available also in English language at the CBC site. I can send a link later on. But when you see specific projects, they are focused on basic needs. So the construction of roads, the water purification systems, waste management systems, etc. So by solving these very problems on the ground, we can achieve multiple goals on win-win principle. So this is also important, that it is not something that European Union or Poland's profit exclusively. It is the win-win principle. And just to leave the space for the discussion, I will always be glad to answer the questions, especially when presenting Poland as the country that is against the relations with Russia. This I cannot agree with that. This is what we advocate for, is to have a constructive approach based on anonymously agreed policy. To sum up, we have the huge political difference, but between Poland and Russia. But the CBC program is one of these rare positive examples, showing how Poles and Russians can work together. So since 2007, so there's 14 years of vibrant cooperation between the regions, and the people have been established. And this is something without doubt positive. It is what I wanted to having said this EU-Russia difficulties, it is important to understand that the CBC program is also the European program. So it is not exclusively Polish-Russian program. This is a part of wider European policy. And we do see attempts to bilateralize relations. So say some countries are good, some countries are bad. With these countries, we would like to have better relations, and with this, they do not deserve so. So we wanted to underline that we have a common European framework for the Russian policy, and the CBC program is definitely one of the most positive examples. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. And this is, of course, the whole the starting point of today's webinar. You know, this is the observation that we start from, the fact that we have cross-border cooperation between the EU and Russia as this rare case, a rare example of constructive engagement, that's showing that, you know, it is still possible despite all the tensions. Now, if we stay with this observation, of course, most of us here, we all want to see better relations between the EU and Russia in the near future. I mean, we don't like the fact that most of the policy frameworks are frozen. And so this is where the question arises, okay, but which lessons can we then learn from this positive case of EU-Russia cross-border cooperation for EU-Russia relations more generally, or for other fields of cooperation between the EU and Russia? Now, I can already summarize some of the things that were mentioned, especially then in, well, the keynote lecture, but also in the first panel, because also there we already asked the speakers if they could think about, okay, what is it that drives the success of cross-border cooperation? And then what can we then learn from this for other fields of cooperation between the EU and Russia? And so some of the things that were highlighted, first of all, is, of course, well, and this is not at all a surprise, but what is really a prerequisite is trust. You know, so there has to be trust between the two partners. So the EU partners on the one hand and Russian partners on the other hand. So there has to be, first of all, trust. Without trust, there's not much you can do. Of course, you can work on building trust, and this is something that was also mentioned. This could be integrated within the framework, that you have activities that help to build this trust. Then very closely related to this, there's also the need for dialogue. So you really have to be able to discuss things openly. Then another prerequisite that comes out of this successful case of cross-border cooperation is that the topics covered in the cooperation have to be of mutual interest to both parties. So in the case of cross-border cooperation, also the themes that have now been identified for the next multi-annual programs, you know, they do really fit within common interest, although I would say that they also very nicely fit the European Commission's agenda, if I may be honest. But of course, if they are about environmental issues and climate change, of course, these are also things that are of great importance to Russia, especially also at the local level. So there has to be somehow a win-win within the cooperation. Then also what seemed to be key to the success is indeed, and this was also mentioned by Mr. Franco, that of course cross-border cooperation is being implemented in a very decentralized manner, meaning that Moscow as such does not have such a great say over the process, because it's really very much all being managed and implemented at the local level. Which helps to probably explain also the success. And then, yeah, another element was that cross-border cooperation as such is quite unique in the sense that it sort of brings together the EU's cohesion policy and then the EU's external policy. That, of course, that's, let's say, a difficult one to then translate into other cases of EU-Russia cooperation. But this was, until now, I would say, the main points that came up during the previous discussion in terms of the lessons that we can draw from the positive example or the positive case of EU-Russia cross-border cooperation. But now I would like to go back to the speakers and ask them if they can think either, well, if they can confirm that, you know, indeed there lies a lot of value in the factors that we have already discussed previously in the webinar, or whether they can see other elements that also should be taken into account. I will go back to the order of the speakers, so I will give the floor first to Professor Makarice.
Thank you. Well, in a general sense, I definitely agree with what you have said, Fabien. I'm just trying to come back for a while to one of my previous studies on cross-border cooperation that was about Russia and Norway. And what we have found out is that the conflict between Russia and NATO, which Norway is definitely part, did not directly translate to the level of cross-border initiatives. And some of them even, I would say, flourished after 2014, when the crisis became the most evident. What we also found out is that most of these trans-border projects were cultural. And that's exactly what we are missing right now, because it's very hard to conduct any cultural projects during the pandemic. And I think pandemic killed a lot of possible initiatives in cultural sphere. I can judge on the basis of my experience of looking at the city of Narva, which is not only border located, but also populated mostly by Russians. And there were so many different plants that have been de facto destroyed. So we do need to take into account these constraining factors right now.
Yes, actually, that also really nicely chimes with one of the points made by a speaker in the first panel, because she was, as a Russian practitioner involved in a cross-border cooperation project. She was presenting her project, which was indeed in the field of culture, and she was also highlighting this unique role that culture seems to have when it comes to EU-Russia cooperation, and not only presumably when it comes to cross-border cooperation, but also more generally. Okay, so then we can move on, and I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Mark Franco.
Yes, Fabienne, I think you have very well summarized the suggestions that were made this morning. Now the question is, how can we move from this set of proposals for, let's say, or rather elements of success, the trust, the dialogue, topics of mutual interest, decentralized management. How can we move from there to a, let's say, an improved relationship between Russia and the European Union that goes beyond? How can we use this project, this program, as a kind of a stepping stone? And of course, we have to be careful because, of course, the success of the project is just that it is based on local communities, people-to-people contact. And if we start kind of moving or influencing, trying to influence these activities for, let's say, broader macroeconomic or macro-political reasons, we might well make the whole thing less effective and ruin the effect of the cross-border cooperation. So I think what we need to do is to be very careful of how we extend, how we go from here. Now, there are two things that I could suggest, but I think that both are fairly dangerous and have to be handled with a lot of care. The first one is to better ensure a kind of a relationship between the cross-border cooperation and the wider cooperation instruments or cooperation policies that the European Union has with Russia. At this moment, there are not too many, but perhaps it is possible that based on the experience of cross-border cooperation, we kind of develop types of cooperation, types of contact between Russia and the European Union that build on this kind of lessons. You mentioned culture. Yes, why don't we kind of try to develop more fully a kind of a cultural cooperation program with Russia, and this culture in a very wide sense. It is not symphonic orchestras and cinema. It also is about, very importantly, education, and that we try to support, on the one hand, by overall policies, the cross-border cooperation efforts in culture and in education, and also on a more macro level, focus on these issues that seem to be, I mean, they have been developing, they have been continuing, even in these times of conflict. I think this is one possibility. Another possibility is that in the context of the cross-border cooperation program, we kind of develop activities that are also otherwise relevant. There is one element on which I'm thinking now, and that is fairly topical. It has been coming up over the last weeks as a problem, and I think it would be dangerous if we try to involve cross-border cooperation in this, but it might be worthwhile that we start thinking about it. I'm talking about the Arctic. I remember that when I was in Moscow, I mean, one day Javier Solana, who was then High Representative for Foreign Policy, was in Moscow for discussions with Lavrov. Afterwards, he did the debriefing for the heads of mission, the European ambassadors. And there's one thing he said that I've always remembered, and that is, if there is going to be a third world war, it will be about the Arctic. And if you see what has been happening over the last years with the militarization of the region, particularly the North Sea route, And even this week, I think it was that in the news was all kinds of mentions of military buildup of Russia, about 6 or 7 military bases, airfields, docks, and so on and so forth, and sophisticated weaponry that is being installed there. So the Arctic seems to be growing into a kind of a security problem. Now, before it is a security problem, in fact, it is in the first instance a kind of an economic opportunity. An economic opportunity because of global warming, mobility, transport, maritime routes becomes easier, and also, of course, the exploitation of minerals and energy resources in the sea become more easy. Okay, that is far away from cross-border cooperation. But nevertheless, there is an active program of cross-border cooperation in that area where trust has been established, where dialogue is taking place, where topics of mutual interest are being developed. Now, I just wonder to what extent, building on that, one cannot kind of extend cross-border cooperation and put an emphasis there so that the trust and the confidence building that happens in this region could extend also to other issues than just the kind of directly people-to-people contacts that are being established, whether that can be a kind of a stepping stone to go further in cooperation, because it creates a kind of a confidence where we can further develop cooperation with Russia and another level with another dimension, but in an area where we have been developing and establishing trust and dialogue on topics of mutual interest already. We were just kind of extended a little bit. I repeat, it is dangerous what I'm saying, and it really has to has to be done with a lot of what the Germans would call Fingerspitzengefühl, with a lot of delicate programming. But I think it is one element that one can consider. There are perhaps other ones, other elements where building on cross-border cooperation and the trust that has been established, one can gently kind of extend the area of cooperation to broader areas.
Okay, yes, well, thank you for giving already a concrete case, namely the Arctic, which indeed has come up as a possible other fields where constructive engagement between the EU and Russia can take place, whether or not in the format of cross-border cooperation, because already indeed within the region there is regional cooperation / cross-border cooperation taking place between the EU and Russia, but at the same time, definitely this also holds certain potential dangers, and so it remains to be seen, of course, to what extent this would become another area of constructive engagement. Let us now turn to the third speaker. We would also like to hear from a Polish perspective how cross-border cooperation as a successful constructive case of engagement between EU and Russia can serve as a stepping stone for cooperation in other fields. So I give you back the floor.
Okay, so thank you, Fabienne. There's so many points that I'd like to start I mean, it's difficult to choose one, but what I'd like to draw your attention that I mentioned the 5 guiding principles for a reason, that the first guiding principle is, directly shows us what to do to improve the relations. So the first guiding principle is about the Minsk agreement. So the full implementation of the Minsk agreement by Russia is a precondition for any significant change in our relations. So I tried as much as I can to avoid the difficult political topics, because the CBC is about the people on the ground, and one of the factors that makes this program work is to avoid the big politics. So the decentralization is indeed one of the factors, and so both the EU specific and the Russia specific is different. but we could go far beyond that. So when seeking how to involve the CBC programs into the bigger politics, it might be at least tricky. But when looking how to improve the cooperation, as probably some of you know, there's a huge ongoing discussion within the European Union on how to shape the relations with Russia, and this was publicly commented on many occasions. So this is so-called stock-taking exercise, and there was it was started in March 2020. Then there was a lot of discussions, and the process is not yet finished. So the EU, what is sure that the 5 guiding principles were reconfirmed as the valid framework for the EU-Russia policy. And the first principle is, of course, about the Minsk agreement. So what I will also say that it is some kind of a trap that we are falling into when seeking on how to engage, how to improve the relations. I mean, it's not the European Union that caused the current situation. It is not the European Union that invaded and illegally annexed Crimea, for instance. It is not the European Union that conducted a cybercrime, cyber attacks that meddled into the election process, etc. I can so name it for the next 15 minutes or half an hour, but this is not our hostile actions that are the basic of the current situation. So this is a kind of trap. It is not on our side to improve the relations. What we can do is, for instance, to better communicate what is our position, to better communicate our offer towards the society. So I mentioned this bilateralization of the relations also for a reason. So for instance, there's a lot of socioeconomic analysis and opinion polls, and I will draw your attention to one of the Levada polls. So the recent Levada polls in Russia. So what has changed since 2008? So in this poll, the 29% of Russians considered Russia to be a European country. So 64% a non-European country. And 2 years ago, a year ago, actually 2019, the numbers were 37 and 55 respectively. So what is growing due to the situation in Russia, due to the communication also, and the idea of the European Union promoted outside Russia is causing that we can discuss about the Polish-Russian CBC program, but it is not, or Estonian-Russian CBC program, but we cannot forget that this is the European Union program, so that the European Union has a concrete offer towards the society, and this is something that we need to work on. So how to communicate the European involvement, the European constructive approach, and instead of seeking new fields of engagement. So we have the framework that already offers us on the fields how to engage, how to work, and the last but not least, the discussion that is going within the European Union and that is not yet finished probably will give us some answers as well to that question.
Okay, thanks also for sharing your view and of course, presumably the Polish view on this issue. I think this also already touches upon the final question, namely, I mean, of course, it's nice to think about what we can learn from this positive example of cross-border cooperation for EU-Russia relations more generally, but of course we have to be aware that there are constraints, that there are limits to using this as a best practice for other fields of cooperation. And I think by what you have already outlined, we are already finding part of the answer to this question. so I think, if I can be a little bit frank, what is missing in the case of cross-border cooperation is the political dimension. So exactly because it is, let's say, very depoliticized, it seems that it is possible. And so when we are moving to more political aspects of cooperation, then we again seem to be stuck. And so this makes, of course, cross-border cooperation in a way also, although it is a best practice of EU-Russia cooperation, it's maybe not the best case to draw lessons from if we want to think about how we can improve cooperation, EU-Russia cooperation in more political fields of cooperation. So I would say that probably the extent to which we can see cross-border cooperation as a best practice for EU-Russia cooperation, it's only to the extent that we don't try to draw lessons for the more political fields of cooperation. At least this is what I would argue also based on listening to what Mr. Kitsik was saying. But nevertheless, I would like to go back also to Professor Makarichev and to Mr. Franco to hear what you have to say on this, because maybe you disagree with this, maybe you have a different view on this. So Professor Makarichev, the floor is yours.
Well, again, in generally, I'm very positive about this idea of kind of spillover effects of best practices and best initiatives. Well, unfortunately, we don't have that many how should I say, confirmations for this theory to be operational in, let's say, general or universal sense, which basically means that we as experts might be useful for identifying those, let's say, new areas, which might include a transborder dimension that are appearing, that are popping up right now. And one of those areas might be related to healthcare. Again, that's my another reference to COVID-19 and the pandemic, etc. Especially if Russian vaccine is produced in Europe, and if Russian vaccine would be allowed to legally be used in Europe. So I think that might create some, islands of cooperation. And another, well, let's say relatively new area is everything related to the climate change policy, including the Green Deal and the just transition policy. So it's still unclear how the Green Deal, in the long run, in short run, it depends on how we look at it, how it might affect relations with Russia. Would it lead to a kind of consolidation of border as a dividing institution, which is quite likely due to differences in environmental standards and practices in the EU and Russia? Or there is something we can do. We can think about transforming a border into, again, a space of interaction. I know that these are just open questions, but that's what I can share with you as a very preliminary ideas.
Yes, well, I'm aware that definitely when it comes to the environment and climate change, these areas do come up also as a possible area where, well, if we follow the 5 principles, also selective engagement could proceed a bit further than currently. So definitely, I think these are possible areas where we could draw from the successful story or success story of cross-border cooperation. And even, I mean, as we know, also climate change and environment have been now identified as one of the key areas in which the next multi-annual framework will focus on for the cross-border programs. Okay, so let's move to Mr. Franco. Maybe you also have some further thoughts that you would like to share on this question. You're still muted.
As I said before, we should kind of think how we can use the success of cross-border cooperation as a stepping stone going a little bit further in other types of projects. But I also said that this is very dangerous and we should certainly not kill the cross-border cooperation success that we have now by trying to extend it too quickly or too far into projects that have a more macroeconomic or macro-political meaning. But I mean, at the same time, we say, oh, okay, cross-border cooperation is about people. Yeah, it is about people, but let's be serious. It's about more than people. It's about building up a civil society. I mean, when I go back to my time in Russia, we had 3 types of small projects, what we would call people to people. One was on the cultural field. We had also a budget for social projects and a budget for human rights democracy projects. In all 3 cases, the aim was reinforcing civil society because I mean, on the cultural side, what we tried to do was support artists, support artistic groups, and also bring Russian cultural actors closer in contact with West European ones. On the social side, we try to kind of stimulate orphanages, help orphanages and other kinds of social initiatives for handicapped children. Was it about the children? Yeah, it was about the children, but it was also about building up a civil society. And the same goes for, of course, the programs on democracy and human rights. Were we about democracy and human rights? Yes, of course we were, but it is about building up civil society. The 3 types of projects were about building up civil society. So what we're doing with the cross-border cooperation programs I mean, this is, I would say, also the European Union agenda, is to reinforce civil society in Russia. And I think this is an element that we should be very genuine about and think about how we can best, what type of projects do indeed best support the coming into being, I mean, the development of civil society in Russia. And there, the first speaker this morning already indicated that on the Russian side, this is not something that they like because they prefer infrastructure. And in the second period that in the graphs that he showed, infrastructure went up and the other projects went down. Okay, so we have to live with that, and we have to live with also with the kind of the priorities that the other side puts on the table. But I think on the side of the European Union, this kind of development of civil society in the border regions should be kind of a clear element on the agenda that we put on the table. Because this is, I mean, short of having wider, broader, more intensive cooperation programs and cooperation with Russia in a much more broader field. I mean, that can happen the moment the political deadlock is being lifted. In the meantime, the effect, what we should aim at is support and strengthen as much as we can civil society in Russia.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think this also very much is in line what Mr. Kitsik has already highlighted. And this is, of course, also one of the so-called 5 guiding principles, namely the 5th one, in which the EU really still puts a lot of emphasis on the need to further establish contacts at the level of civil society, but also to further strengthen the people-to-people contacts. So, Mr. Kitsik, I don't know if you would still like to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I agree almost fully. Indeed, the people-to-people contacts are about the strengthening the civil society as well. Polish official position is that human rights and civil society should be a top priority when it comes to EU-Russia relations. And this is something that we advocate for, but we also do a lot of things in practice. But this is not the topic of our discussion today. But what I wanted to, my reservation is that Russia has been changing a lot. So what happened in Russia in 2019, 2020, and what is happening right now, especially the December 2020 legislation. And the problem is that promoting the civil society agenda is getting more and more difficult. So the freedom of press, freedom of association is significantly limited. Naming numerous organizations and even people as foreign agents, like trying to push any kind of illegitimate actions to try to what is the situation of the civil society is deteriorating dramatically. So having this in mind, we also need to think on how to strengthen the civil society, but also how not to make the people that are working on civil society, how not to put them in danger. So this also is something that we need to have in mind, that Russia in 2004, 2010, or even 2012 or 16 was completely different country than it is now. And this is unfortunately much more difficult environment for the civil society.
Mr. Franco, you would like to respond to that? Yes, you need to unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Okay, now it's okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes the effect you have, or the best effect you have, is not through the way you think you're going to have it. Let me give you an example. From my experience in Russia, that I discovered there on, it's something that I lived there on the spot. We had, as I said, we had 3 different kinds of projects that were, or programs that were addressing small civil society initiatives, culturally, socially, and politically. I can say that the least effective was political. You didn't really reach a lot of people. And even when we had this activities for civil society organizations dealing with Chechnya, that was a big topic at the moment, at that time, I mean, it didn't have the least effect. Of course, these people were meaning, and we supported them a lot, but on the broad public opinion in Russia, it had zilch impact. What did have an impact is the support we gave to the civil society in, for instance, on the social areas, like I give the example of orphanages. Was it through the money that we, this 100 or 200,000 euros that we gave to the orphanages? No. It was by allowing the people to network. This is what I discovered. We had a meeting of all the projects we had in the Moscow region. So in the afternoon, we had all the responsible people of the project with various orphanages and housing and institutions for handicapped and so on and so forth, making that explanations. They all sat there, they listened. So like Russians can listen very disciplined to long speeches. But then in the evening, I had a reception, and during that reception, the guy from the orphanages of the north of Moscow went to the guy of the orphanages of the south of Moscow and said, bloody hell, what you're doing is very interesting, because I'm also trying it. I'm trying to put my local district authorities on the pressure to this or that, and I see that you succeeded in doing it. How did you do it? And in fact, the networking that we allowed through this various diverse types of social support for social initiatives did not so much have an impact through the money we gave to the initiative, but by the networking that we put into place and allowed them to meet each other. And that is, I think, that perhaps something that we should also try to stimulate in the context of cross-border programs, that the operators, the actors, start more intensively talking to each other, that across the various projects, people start meeting, not just on one border, but perhaps on different borders, so that they can learn from each other, because that kind of gives them a sense of solidity. Other people are doing the same thing that I'm doing, and other people can give me kind of hints of how I can do or this better, how I can put or better work together with local authorities and things like this. And I think this is perhaps something that, I don't know to what extent that it happens, perhaps it happens now already extensively, but that is to allow civil society organizations across a wide board to come together and to network, to learn from each other's experiences, to reinforce each other, because they become aware that they're not alone in doing what they're doing, but there are other people also doing, and they can learn from each other and they can support each other. That's the kind of last remark I wanted to make.
Yes, and I think this also ties into what we already discussed. So the fact that the extent to which we can use cross-border cooperation as a best case for other fields of cooperation between the EU and Russia is to the extent that it works in other non-political fields of cooperation, because as you've just mentioned, the more political projects were, or let's say in nature, the more political they were in nature, well, the less effective they were. I think this is also quite an important lesson that we can take home. Now I see that we are starting to run out of, well, we still have about 5 minutes left, but so far we only have one question in the chat. So I was wondering whether anyone else in the audience wanted to raise a question, because now I would say now is the time to do so, because we will soon be running out of time and then there will be no opportunity anymore. So to the participants, I would really like to explicitly ask if you have any questions, so please let us know now, so that I can give you the opportunity to have your question also answered by one of the speakers. But so we do have one question. It's quite a specific question, and I think it's directed specifically at Professor Makarichev. So I don't know, Professor Makarichev, if you feel okay with addressing the question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So the question was whether and how the Baltic states have perceived recent speech by Putin during the celebration of the Days of Crimea in Moscow, in which Russian president has underscored that he will never tolerate someone using Russia's rich gifts to damage the Russian Federation. And yeah, so it looked like a warning signal to Ukraine and Baltic states. Well, definitely I can confirm that this rhetoric, which by the way is not for the first time used by the Russian president, is meant to send a certain signal to basically neighboring countries, and then mostly neighboring countries. But my point here is that it's increasingly hard for Russia to point to countries like, for example, Estonia, and claim that they are whatever, anti-Russian, Russophobic, or they're trying to damage the interest of Russian Federation, etc. I think the current government, and I will be speaking for Estonian basically, is well quite rational. Again, trying to, on the one hand, not to do anything that might irritate Russia, but in the meantime, also taking a firm position when it comes to normative issues. And normative issues are tremendously important for keeping the European Union operational and functional as an alliance. So in this sense, by investing into the normative agenda, well, these countries also invest into their into their own interests. So in this sense, I would say that many things are changing, and I'm not sure whether the Kremlin kind of duly notices those changes. For example, memory politics in Estonia is changing. If you look at what was the dominant position in the 1990s and compare it to 2020, 2021, you will see that memory politics became much less accusatory and much more, let's say, inclusive mostly about raising questions rather than pointing to the figure of evil. Then an interesting turn, for example, a party in Estonia who was always known as having the harshest position towards Russian minority, EKRE, now completely changed its political rhetoric, and now they are turning to Estonian Russophones and trying to play this conservative card and basically integrate them into Estonian political mainstream. So, I mean, there are many changes that are happening, and these changes are making, again, more and more hard to use this, argument of some countries being, unfriendly, inimical, and even detrimental for the interest of Russian Federation. For example, Estonian Foreign Ministry, that's what I know from my experience, is increasingly interested in having expertise on Russia. So again, this is another ingredient in this, in this pragmatism that is being developing in Estonia very much. So that would be my answer.
Okay, thanks. Well, that's of course very interesting to hear it from someone who is based in Estonia, but of course can also look at it from a Russian perspective. Now, in the meantime, we have 2 more questions, so I think we can try to quickly also answer that before we wrap up. So the first question is from Michel Annalini, and he wonders whether there's any chance that more political cooperation between the EU and Russia could come in the near future, perhaps in a post-Putin Russia. Well, with the latest changes in Russia, I'm not sure, or constitutional changes, I'm not sure that we will see a post-Putin era anytime soon. But I think we still need to, of course, raise this question, because it's a question that is on a lot of people's minds in Europe. Now, maybe I can ask Mr. Kircik to try and answer this question from a Polish perspective, of course, because I'm sure also for Poland this is an important question.
So yes, that's a great question, although it's difficult for me to answer. What I can say that whatever scenario we think about, when it comes to Russia policy, we may be sure that there is still a chance that we are going to be surprised. So this is the beauty of the politics and the diplomacy. So I would like not to go very much into the details, as the question is really complex. But for now, that we are always, as Poland, as the European Union, we are always trying to propose a constructive offer. So we are not only, there's no stick and carrot. I mean, we are trying to. We understand that there are differences, but we have a neighbor that will be still, regardless who is in charge, and that this is the neighbor that is important to us. Unfortunately, not everything relies on the European side. So we would welcome any positive change towards the international law. So when we start working on the basis of international law, then of course there is a lot of things to be that we can have in common, or that we can discuss, develop, improve, etc., etc. But from my point of view, and for this very moment, it is difficult to predict.
Mr. Franco, yes, please, the floor is yours.
Briefly, sorry, very briefly. In fact, there is an important political discussion going on at this moment, a very important one, and that is on Iran and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And you never know what's going to come out of that. I mean, this is kind of world geopolitics where Russia and the European Union stand on the same side, and where the if it is a positive outcome, if there is a positive outcome, it will be, or it will have a great impact, not just on Iran and relations between Iran and the rest of the world, but also in the region, because the relations with Saudi Arabia, with Israel, with Syria, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Perhaps the next important political discussions with Russia will not be on the situation in Europe, but on the situation in West Asia.
No, it's true that indeed, when it comes to Iran, this is another rare case in which the EU and Russia seem to be on the same page, and where they seem to support each other's position. It's currently indeed a very interesting period in this regard, because it will be interesting to see how the whole topic of the nuclear deal in Iran will evolve. Then we have two more questions, which I think are really quite ambitious to answer in a few minutes, to be honest. So I'm not sure whether we still have enough time to deal into the first question, namely about the question how the emergence of the new geopolitical consortiums like BRICS will influence the strategy for Russia to balance interests and stakes with other partners and collaborations in the region and beyond. I think we probably need a new webinar to go into depth about that question. I think the follow-up question is more specific. Can the TB drones change the situation in eastern Ukraine? This is quite specific, although I think it's quite, let's say, already quite far away from today's discussion on cross-border cooperation. So I'm also not sure whether we can still go into this. I'm looking at the speakers. Is there anyone who would like to share anything about any insights on these questions? Not really? Okay. Well, Professor Makarachev, did you want to go into any of these questions?
Well, on BRICS, I'm not sure that this is, let's say, indeed relevant for what we are discussing today. I'm not sure that BRICS is a game changer in any possible respects. And I'm also equally skeptical about post-Putin Russia. Post-Putin Russia does not necessarily need to be more liberal and more democratic. And in this sense, well, frankly speaking, I'm more on the pessimistic side.
Okay, well, I see it's 3:05 local time here, so I think we should probably wrap up. It's already been a long day for all of us who were following the webinar from the morning. But I think we can be quite optimistic in saying that despite the fact that the keynote speaker didn't show up, this was quite a successful and interesting webinar. So I think we managed to really dig into all the questions that we wanted to look into. Then, of course, we can continue discussing certain issues, but some issues definitely, I think, could feed into a policy brief on these issues. So let's see whether we can write a policy brief as a follow-up of this webinar. Now, I should also, of course, thank the speakers of this panel, but also of the previous panel, and also the speaker who very magically managed to step in when our keynote speaker didn't turn up. Then let me also thank all the people who were involved in organizing this webinar. In particular, I would like to thank Natalia Skripnikova, because it's really thanks to her that we were having this webinar. She came with the idea of organizing a webinar on this very important topic. So let us thank in particular Natalia for initiating the idea of the webinar. Okay, so I think we can conclude here. Thank you everyone, also of course the participants, for your interest in the webinar. And I believe that we will hopefully come back to you with perhaps a written outcome of today's webinar. So thank you to all, and enjoy the rest of your day.